Hello everyone, and welcome to Shadow Frames, where we uncover the stories hidden within the shadows of history. Before we begin today's tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I always love to know which corners of the world our stories reach. Today, we're delving into a particularly intriguing mystery surrounding a wedding photograph taken in 1903. At first glance, it appears to be a perfectly normal celebration of matrimony from the Edwardian era. But as we'll discover, appearances can be deceiving, especially when you look closer at the maid's face. The photograph in question was discovered in the attic of the Thornfield Estate, a once grand manor house in the rural countryside of northern England. The estate had remained in the same family for generations until financial difficulties forced its sale in 2018. It was during the clearing of the house that a small wooden box was found tucked away beneath the floorboards of the attic. Inside was a collection of photographs, letters, and a small diary, all dating back to the early 1900s. Among these items was a wedding photograph, remarkably well preserved for its age. The photograph showed a wedding party posed on the grand staircase of what was clearly Thornfield Estate. The bride, resplendent in an elaborate gown of ivory silk with intricate lace detailing, stood beside her groom, a stern-looking man in his early 30s, dressed in formal mourning attire, as was customary for gentlemen of standing in that era. Surrounding them were various family members, all dressed in their finest clothing, their expressions ranging from joyful to stoically proud, typical for photographs of that time when subjects had to remain still for extended periods. But it was the figure standing slightly apart from the main group that drew attention. A young woman in a maid's uniform, positioned at the edge of the frame, almost as if she had been included as an afterthought. When examined with the naked eye, there seemed nothing unusual about her. Just another servant of the household included in the photograph, perhaps as a testament to her importance to the family, or simply because she had been present on the day. However, when the photograph was digitized and enlarged, something disturbing became apparent in the maid's face. Her features, while at first glance normal, revealed something unsettling upon closer inspection. Her eyes seemed to contain a strange, almost luminous quality, and her expression did not match the occasion. While everyone else displayed appropriate emotions for a wedding, joy, pride, solemnity, the maid's face held what could only be described as a look of abject terror. But who was this maid? And what was the story behind her frightened expression? To answer these questions, we must delve deeper into the history of Thornfield Estate and the people who lived there. The bride in the photograph was identified from accompanying letters as Miss Eleanor Blackwood, who was marrying Lord James Harrington, the heir to a considerable fortune and the neighboring estate. The marriage was, as was common in those days among the upper classes, largely arranged to unite two prominent families and their lands. Eleanor had been raised in relative seclusion at Thornfield, educated by governesses and rarely permitted to venture beyond the estate's boundaries. Her father, Sir William Blackwood, was known in local circles as a man of rigid principles and strict discipline. After the death of Eleanor's mother during childbirth, when Eleanor was just 5 years old, Sir William had become even more reclusive and controlling. The maid in the photograph was identified from notations on the back as one Catherine Murray, who had entered service at Thornfield at the age of 14, 2 years prior to the wedding. She had been assigned specifically as lady's maid to Eleanor, responsible for assisting with her toilette, maintaining her wardrobe, and providing companionship of a sort, though always with the clear division of mistress and servant maintained. The diary found in the wooden box belonged to Catherine, and it is through her private writings that we begin to understand the events leading up to that wedding day in 1903, and the reason for the terror captured in her expression. Catherine's diary begins, innocuously enough, with the musings of a young girl grateful to have secured a position in a grand house, especially as lady's maid to someone as kind as Miss Eleanor. The early entries speak of her awe at the grandeur of Thornfield, her struggles to learn the complexities of her duties, and her growing fondness for her mistress. "Miss Eleanor is unlike any lady I have known," she wrote in October 1901. "Though she has been raised in luxury, there is no haughtiness in her manner. She speaks to me as though I were almost her equal, asking after my family and sharing confidences I am certain her father would not approve of." As the months passed, Catherine's entries reveal that she and Eleanor developed a close bond, unusual for the strict class divisions of the time. Eleanor, isolated by her father's restrictions, found in Catherine a friend and confidant. Catherine, in turn, developed a fierce loyalty to her mistress. Today, Miss Eleanor confided that she has no desire to marry Lord Harrington, reads an entry from early 1902. She has met him only twice at formal dinners and found him cold and calculating. She says his eyes remind her of the glass eyes in the stuffed fox in her father's study. But Sir William will hear no objections. The marriage has been arranged since her birth, and she must fulfill her duty to the family. The diary entries grow increasingly concerning as the wedding date approaches. Catherine writes of overhearing arguments between Eleanor and her father, of finding her mistress in tears, and of strange occurrences within the house. There was a terrible row this evening, Catherine wrote in January 1903, 6 months before the wedding. I was polishing the silver in the pantry when I heard Sir William shouting. He had discovered the letters Miss Eleanor has been exchanging with Mr. Thomas Winters, the new gardener's son. Sir William called her shameful and threatened to dismiss the entire Winters family if she did not cease all communication with Thomas immediately. When Miss Eleanor protested that she loved Thomas, Sir William struck her across the face. I dropped the candlestick I was polishing, and the noise betrayed my presence. Sir William looked at me with such cold fury that I feared he might strike me as well. Instead, he ordered me to my room and forbade me from speaking of what I had witnessed. The following entries detail Catherine's growing concern for Eleanor's well-being. The young woman, once spirited despite her sheltered upbringing, became increasingly withdrawn. She ate little, spoke less, and spent hours staring out of her bedroom window toward the gardener's cottage where Thomas lived with his family. I fear for Miss Eleanor's health, Catherine wrote in March. She has grown so pale and thin, and there is a vacancy in her eyes that frightens me. Today, when I was arranging her hair, she suddenly gripped my hand and whispered, "He watches me, Catherine. Even when he is not here, he watches me." When I asked who she meant, she would not say, but I fear she spoke of her father, who has taken to patrolling the corridors at night and has placed a lock on her bedroom door, on the outside. As the wedding day grew closer, Catherine's entries become more frantic. She writes of strange noises in the night, of Eleanor's increasing distress, and of her own growing conviction that something sinister was occurring at Thornfield. Miss Eleanor begged me today to help her escape, reads an entry from May. She wishes to run away with Thomas before the wedding can take place. I am torn between my loyalty to her and my fear of Sir William's retribution. If we are caught, I will surely lose my position, and my family relies on my wages. But how can I deny her this chance at happiness? The next several entries detail the secret plans Catherine and Eleanor made for the young woman's escape. They would wait until the household was asleep, then use the servants' staircase to leave the house. Thomas would be waiting with a cart at the edge of the property, and they would travel through the night to reach the coast, where they planned to board a ship to America. All is arranged, Catherine wrote on June 10th. In 3 days' time, Miss Eleanor will be free of this place and of the marriage she dreads. I have hidden a small bag with essentials beneath the loose floorboard in my room, and Miss Eleanor has secreted away some jewelry that belonged to her mother, which she can sell once they are safely away. But the entry for June 13th, the night planned for the escape, reveals that their scheme was discovered. Disaster. All is lost. As we crept down the servants' staircase, Sir William appeared at the bottom, a lantern in his hand and Thomas held by 2 burly men I did not recognize. Sir William knew of our plan. Someone must have betrayed us. He had Thomas beaten before our eyes and then ordered him taken away. Miss Eleanor screamed and tried to run to him, but Sir William restrained her with such force that I feared he would break her arm. I was sent to my room under guard, and I have heard nothing of Miss Eleanor since. The house is deathly quiet, save for Sir William's footsteps as he paces the corridor. There follows a gap in the diary, 2 weeks during which Catherine made no entries. When the writing resumes, her penmanship has changed, becoming shaky and uneven, as though written by a hand that trembles. They are saying Thomas Winters took his own life, she wrote on June 28th, found hanging from a tree in the woods beyond the estate, but I do not believe it. Thomas was full of life and hope. He would never abandon Miss Eleanor in such a way. Something terrible has happened. Something Sir William is responsible for. I am certain of it. The next entry is even more disturbing. Miss Eleanor has returned to the house, but she has changed. Sir William claims she suffered a nervous collapse upon hearing of Thomas's death and was sent to recuperate at her aunt's house in Scotland. But the woman who has returned is not the Miss Eleanor I knew. She moves like a sleepwalker, speaks only when spoken to, and her eyes are empty, as though the life has been drained from them. When I tried to speak to her of Thomas, she looked at me as if I were a stranger and said, "I do not know anyone by that name." Sir William watches her constantly, and he has given her a new medicine, which she must take morning and night. After she takes it, she becomes even more docile and vacant. The entries that follow document Catherine's growing horror as the wedding preparations continue, despite Eleanor's altered state. None of the other servants seemed to find anything amiss, or if they did, they were too afraid of losing their positions to speak of it. The household staff had been carefully culled over the preceding months, with anyone who might have been sympathetic to Eleanor or shown too much curiosity about Thomas's death dismissed on various pretexts. The dressmaker came today for Miss Eleanor's final fitting, Catherine wrote in early July. The wedding gown is a marvel of craftsmanship, ivory silk with layer upon layer of Brussels lace, seed pearls sewn by hand onto the bodice, a train that extends for yards behind her. It must have cost a small fortune. Miss Eleanor stood motionless as a mannequin while the dressmaker pinned and adjusted, showing no interest in the gown that will mark the beginning of her life as Lady Harrington. When asked if she was pleased with any particular detail, she merely nodded vaguely, her eyes focused on some point in the middle distance. The dressmaker, who has worked with many brides, seemed disturbed by Miss Eleanor's lack of response, but said nothing beyond murmuring to her assistant about wedding nerves. If only it were that simple. After they left, Miss Eleanor continued to stand in the center of the room, still as a statue, until I gently guided her to a chair. She did not resist, but neither did she seem aware of moving. It was as though her body was present, but her mind was elsewhere, or nowhere at all. The wedding is to proceed as planned, Catherine wrote on July 5th. Lord Harrington visited yesterday and spent an hour closeted with Sir William in his study. I was serving tea in the drawing room when they emerged, and I have never seen Sir William look so satisfied, like a cat that has caught a particularly fat mouse. Lord Harrington's expression was more difficult to read. He seemed thoughtful, his eyes calculating as they rested on Miss Eleanor, who sat by the window engaged in the embroidery that now occupies her hands whenever she is not eating or sleeping. He crossed to her and spoke briefly, asking after her health in tones that suggested concern but did not reach his eyes. Miss Eleanor responded with the empty phrases she has been taught to recite. "I am quite well, thank you. I look forward to our marriage. Father has been most attentive during my recovery." Lord Harrington observed her closely as she spoke, and something in his expression made my blood run cold. It was not disappointment at her vacant state, as one might expect from a man confronted with his future wife's obvious mental disturbance. Rather, it was a look of satisfaction, even approval. He and Sir William exchanged a glance over Miss Eleanor's bowed head, a look of mutual understanding that convinced me Lord Harrington is fully aware of whatever has been done to render Miss Eleanor so compliant. Perhaps he even requested it, unwilling to marry a woman who might have a mind and will of her own. The wedding is now set for July 25th, just 3 weeks away. Arrangements are being made for the ceremony to take place here at Thornfield, in the family chapel, with a reception to follow in the Grand Hall. Invitations have been sent to all the county families and to Lord Harrington's extensive connections in London. There will be no postponement, no consideration for Miss Eleanor's delicate condition. Indeed, it seems that her current state is precisely what both men desire in a bride and daughter-in-law. As the wedding day approached, Catherine's entries become increasingly paranoid and frightened. She began to suspect that her own position was precarious, that once the wedding was over and Eleanor removed to Harrington Hall as Lord Harrington's wife, there would be no further need for a lady's maid who knew too much about the events preceding the marriage. "I am being watched," she wrote on July 15th. "I feel eyes upon me at all hours of the day and night. Twice I have woken to find my room searched, my few possessions disturbed. The first time I thought perhaps one of the other maids had been snooping, looking for something to steal, or simply curious about my private life. But this morning, I found my diary had been moved from where I had hidden it beneath the loose floorboard. It was replaced, but not in the exact position I had left it. Someone knows of its existence and has read its contents. Yet I have not been confronted or dismissed, which can only mean they are waiting for something. Perhaps for the wedding to be safely concluded before dealing with me. Today, Mrs. Wilson, the housekeeper, informed me that after the wedding, I am to be reassigned to kitchen duties rather than continuing as Miss Eleanor's lady's maid. When I asked why, she would not meet my eyes and said only that it was Sir William's decision. "Lord Harrington has his own staff at Harrington Hall," she explained, "and would not require my services. This is unusual. Typically, a lady's personal maid would accompany her to her new household, especially one of Miss Eleanor's station marrying into a title. The fact that I am to be kept at Thornfield, relegated to the kitchens where I will have no contact with Miss Eleanor, confirms my suspicion that Sir William fears what I might reveal if allowed to remain in close proximity to his daughter after she becomes Lady Harrington. I fear he suspects I know something of what has happened to Thomas, and of whatever he has done to change Miss Eleanor so drastically. The entry for July 20th, 5 days before the wedding, is particularly chilling, revealing the moment when Catherine discovered the truth about Eleanor's transformation. I have discovered the truth and I am terrified. Tonight I took a risk that might cost me everything, but I had to know what was happening to Miss Eleanor. After she retired for the evening, I concealed myself in the small linen closet adjacent to her bedroom, leaving the door slightly ajar so I could observe without being seen. At precisely 10 o'clock, Sir William entered her room, carrying the blue glass bottle that has become a fixture of the household routine. Miss Eleanor was already in bed, but sat up obediently when he entered. I watched through the crack in the door as he measured a dose of the liquid into a small silver cup and held it to her lips. As Miss Eleanor drank it, Sir William spoke to her in a low, insistent voice, repeating phrases in a rhythmic pattern that reminded me of the hypnotist who performed at the village fair last summer. "You will forget Thomas Winters," he said, and Miss Eleanor nodded vacantly. "You will be an obedient wife to Lord Harrington." Another nod. "You will never speak of what happened in June." A third nod. "You will be docile and compliant in all things." The final nod was accompanied by a visible slackening of Miss Eleanor's already vacant expression, her eyes becoming even more unfocused, her mouth slightly open as though she had forgotten how to close it properly. Sir William continued with his instructions for several minutes, covering everything from how she was to behave at the wedding to the precise words she was to say to any guests who inquired about her illness or commented on her changed demeanor. It was as though he was programming an automaton rather than speaking to his daughter. When he was satisfied with her responses, he administered a second, smaller dose of the liquid, after which Miss Eleanor lay down and almost immediately fell into a deep sleep, her breathing slow and shallow. As Sir William prepared to leave her room, I shrank back into the shadows of the linen closet, hardly daring to breathe. He paused at the door, looking back at his daughter's sleeping form with an expression not of paternal love or even concern, but of cold satisfaction, like an artist contemplating a sculpture he has finally shaped to his precise specifications. When he left her room, I barely had time to conceal myself deeper among the folded sheets. As he passed the closet, I saw his face clearly in the lamplight. He was smiling, not with joy, but with a terrible satisfaction that made my blood run cold. I remained hidden for nearly an hour, afraid to move lest he return unexpectedly. When I finally dared to emerge and check on Miss Eleanor, she was still deeply asleep, unresponsive even when I whispered her name and gently shook her shoulder. Whatever was in that blue bottle had rendered her completely insensible. Not the natural sleep of exhaustion, but a drug-induced state from which she could not be roused. I returned to my room by a circuitous route, avoiding the main corridors where I might be seen by Sir William or his valet. As I write these words, my hand still trembles with the implications of what I have witnessed. Sir William has been drugging Eleanor and using some form of hypnotic suggestion to erase her memories and control her behavior. This explains the dramatic change in her personality, her inability to recall Thomas, her docile acceptance of the marriage she once dreaded. The medicine in the blue bottle, some concoction of Dr. Bartlett's creation, no doubt, has made her susceptible to this manipulation, transforming her from a spirited young woman into a living doll that can be posed and prompted to perform as her father desires. And now I understand why Sir William is so determined that I should not accompany Miss Eleanor to Harrington Hall after the wedding. I am the only one who knows her as she was before, the only one who might recognize moments when the drugs wear off and her true self struggles to resurface. I am a witness to his crimes, not just the apparent murder of Thomas Winters, but this ongoing destruction of his own daughter's mind and will. The entry for July 24th, the day before the wedding, is the last substantial one. I can bear this no longer. I have written down everything I know about Thomas's disappearance and Sir William's control over Miss Eleanor. I do not believe Thomas killed himself. I believe Sir William had him murdered to prevent Eleanor's escape, and whatever drug he is administering to Miss Eleanor has transformed her from a spirited young woman into an empty shell who will offer no resistance to this marriage she once dreaded. I have sealed my account in an envelope addressed to the local magistrate and given it to Daniel, the stable boy who sometimes carries messages to the village. He has promised to deliver it tomorrow while the household is occupied with the wedding. I pray it will bring justice for Thomas and free Miss Eleanor from her father's control before it is too late. If anything happens to me, let this diary stand as testament to the truth. The final entry, dated July 25, 1903, the wedding day, consists of just a few lines. He knows. I saw it in his eyes at breakfast. Daniel did not go to the village. The stables are locked and he is nowhere to be found. The blue bottle was on Sir William's desk when I brought his morning tea. He asked if I would like to see what was inside it. I said nothing, but he smiled and told me I would understand everything soon enough. The wedding is in 3 hours, I am afraid. And that is the last entry in Catherine Murray's diary. The photograph taken that day shows her standing at the edge of the wedding party, her face frozen in an expression of terror that becomes apparent only when the image is enlarged. What happened to Catherine Murray after the wedding? There is no official record of her departure from Thornfield Estate, no letter of reference as would have been customary when a servant left a position. She simply vanishes from the historical record. As for Eleanor Blackwood, now Lady Harrington, records show that she died just 3 years after her marriage, supposedly from complications following the birth of her second child. Lord Harrington remarried within a year of her death and went on to have 3 more children with his second wife. Sir William Blackwood continued to live at Thornfield Estate until his death in 1915. His obituary in the local newspaper described him as a respected gentleman of the old school who had endured the tragedy of outliving his only daughter. The truth of what happened at Thornfield Estate in 1903 might have remained buried forever if not for the discovery of Catherine's diary and that wedding photograph with its disturbing detail. Some researchers have suggested that the strange appearance of Catherine's face in the photograph might be nothing more than a quirk of early photography. Perhaps she moved slightly during the exposure, creating a blurred effect that only becomes noticeable when the image is enlarged. Others, however, point to her diary entries and the suspicious circumstances surrounding Thomas Winter's death and Eleanor's transformation as evidence of something far more sinister. Was Sir William Blackwood drugging his daughter to force her compliance in a marriage she opposed? Did he arrange the murder of Thomas Winters to prevent Eleanor's escape? And what happened to Catherine Murray after she wrote that final, frightened entry in her diary? The wooden box containing the photograph and diary was purchased at the estate sale by a collector of Edwardian memorabilia, who later donated the items to a local historical society. Researchers who have examined the photograph using modern technology have made another disturbing discovery. When the image is subjected to spectral analysis, there appears to be something written on the wall behind Catherine, something not visible to the naked eye or even under normal digital enlargement. The words, faint but discernible, read, "He put it in the tea." This has led to speculation that Sir William may have drugged Catherine as well as Eleanor, perhaps administering the same substance he used to make his daughter compliant. If Catherine had indeed sent a letter to the local magistrate accusing Sir William of murder and coercion, as she claimed in her diary, there is no record of it ever being received or investigated. One final piece of the puzzle emerged in 2020, when renovation work was being carried out on what had once been the servants' quarters at Thornfield Estate. Behind a section of wall that had been plastered over, workers discovered a small space containing a skeleton. Forensic analysis determined that it belonged to a young woman between the ages of 16 and 18 who had died approximately 120 years earlier. The cause of death could not be conclusively determined due to the condition of the remains, but the forensic anthropologist noted fractures to the hyoid bone that could indicate strangulation. There was also evidence of a healed fracture to the right wrist that corresponded with an entry in Catherine's diary from December 1901, where she mentioned slipping on the icy steps while carrying laundry and injuring her arm. While it cannot be stated with absolute certainty that the remains are those of Catherine Murray, the circumstantial evidence is compelling. It seems likely that after writing that final diary entry, Catherine met a tragic end at the hands of someone determined to silence her, most likely Sir William Blackwood himself. The wedding photograph, with its seemingly perfect depiction of an Edwardian marriage celebration, thus becomes something far more sinister when one looks closely at the maid's face. It captures the final hours, perhaps even the final moments, of a young woman who had witnessed terrible crimes and was about to pay the ultimate price for her knowledge. But there is one last twist to this tale. In 2022, a descendant of Lord James Harrington came forward with a collection of letters that had been preserved by the family. Among them was a letter written by Lord Harrington to his brother just 2 weeks after his marriage to Eleanor Blackwood. In it, he expresses concern about his new wife's mental state and makes a disturbing reference to her father. Eleanor remains withdrawn and speaks little, though she is obedient in all things. Sir William assures me that this docility is natural to her character, but I have heard whispers among the servants that suggest otherwise. Yesterday, I discovered a small blue bottle among my father-in-law's possessions. When I inquired as to its contents, he became quite agitated and claimed it was merely a tonic for his nerves. Later that evening, I observed him adding drops from this bottle to Eleanor's wine at dinner. When I confronted him privately afterward, he offered me the most extraordinary proposition. He suggested that a husband might find it advantageous to have a wife who is, as he put it, malleable in both mind and spirit, and offered to share his methods with me. I confess, brother, that I was both repulsed and intrigued. What manner of man have I allied myself with through this marriage? The letter suggests that Lord Harrington was at least aware of Sir William's manipulation of Eleanor, and possibly complicit in its continuation after the marriage. This may explain why, after Eleanor's death, Lord Harrington was so quick to remarry. Perhaps his second wife was more naturally malleable than Eleanor had been before her father's interventions. As for the blue bottle mentioned in both Catherine's diary and Lord Harrington's letter, its contents remain a mystery. Some historians have speculated that it might have contained laudanum, a tincture of opium that was widely available in the Victorian and Edwardian eras and was known to produce a docile, dreamlike state in those who consumed it. Others suggest it might have been a more exotic compound, perhaps obtained during Sir William's documented travels to India and the Far East in his younger days. Whatever the substance was, its effects on Eleanor were dramatic and devastating, transforming a young woman described in Catherine's early diary entries as spirited and kind into the empty-eyed bride seen in the wedding photograph. The story of Thornfield Estate, of Eleanor Blackwood and Catherine Murray, serves as a chilling reminder of the dark secrets that can lurk behind seemingly perfect historical images. It speaks to the vulnerability of women in an era when they had few rights and little recourse against the will of the men who controlled their lives. It also highlights the precarious position of servants, who might witness the worst of their employer's behavior but were powerless to intervene without risking their livelihoods and potentially their lives. The wedding photograph from 1903, with its well-dressed family members and its terrified maid, encapsulates these power dynamics in a single, haunting image. When we look at historical photographs, we often focus on the wealthy and privileged individuals who commissioned them. But sometimes it is in the faces at the margins, the servants, the workers, the individuals deemed unimportant by the standards of their time, that the true story can be found. In the case of the Thornfield wedding photograph, it is Catherine Murray's frightened face that tells us something is terribly wrong with the seemingly perfect scene, and through her diary, discovered over a century later, she finally gets to tell her story, even if she did not live to see justice done for either herself or the young mistress she tried to protect. As we conclude this exploration of the disturbing secret behind this seemingly ordinary wedding photograph from 1903, I'm left wondering, how many other historical images contain similar hidden stories? How many other servants, standing at the edges of photographs, held terrible secrets they dared not speak aloud? And how many of those secrets remain buried, waiting for someone to look a little closer, to zoom in on the details that others have overlooked? Before I leave you today, I want to invite you to subscribe to Shadow Frames if you haven't already, and to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. Your support allows us to continue uncovering these hidden historical narratives and bringing them into the light. Until next time, remember to look closely at the shadows, for that is where the true stories often hide. And the crowd at the Thornfield Estate had gathered in the grand hall, the ornate decorations and floral arrangements creating a scene of sophisticated elegance. The year was 1903, and no expense had been spared for the union of Miss Eleanor Blackwood and Lord James Harrington. The marriage would unite two of the most prominent families in the county, a strategic alliance that had been planned since the birth of the bride. As the guests took their places for the ceremony, Catherine Murray moved silently through the crowd, performing her duties as lady's maid to Miss Eleanor. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the bride's train, careful to keep her face lowered, avoiding the penetrating gaze of Sir William Blackwood, who stood nearby speaking in hushed tones with Lord Harrington. "You look beautiful, miss," Catherine whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle murmur of conversation filling the hall. Eleanor did not respond. Her once vibrant blue eyes stared vacantly ahead, her face a perfect mask of serene compliance. She had been like this for weeks now, ever since her failed attempt to escape with Thomas Winters, the gardener's son. Ever since Sir William had begun administering the mysterious contents of the blue bottle to her morning and night. Catherine fought back tears as she remembered the Eleanor she had known, spirited, kind, and desperately in love with Thomas. That Eleanor was gone, replaced by this hollow shell who would soon pledge herself to a man she had once described as having eyes like the stuffed fox in father's study. The music began, signaling that the ceremony was about to commence. Catherine stepped back, taking her place at the edge of the assembled group, where servants were permitted to witness the proceedings while remaining appropriately separate from their betters. As the minister began to speak, Catherine's mind raced. The letter she had written to the magistrate detailing Sir William's crimes, his drugging of Eleanor, his suspected role in Thomas's death, had never been delivered. Daniel, the stable boy she had entrusted it to, had disappeared, and this morning she had seen the blue bottle on Sir William's desk, had seen the knowing look in his eyes when he asked if she wanted to know what was inside it. He knows, she thought desperately. He knows what I've discovered, what I've written in my diary. Her diary, hidden beneath the loose floorboard in her small attic room, was now the only evidence of the truth. If anything happened to her, would anyone ever find it? Would anyone ever know what had really happened at Thornfield Estate? The vows were exchanged, Eleanor's voice flat and emotionless, as she promised to love, honor, and obey Lord Harrington. Catherine observed Lord Harrington's expression as he gazed at his new bride, not with love or even desire, but with a calculating assessment, as though evaluating a prized mare newly added to his stables. As the ceremony concluded, the wedding party was arranged on the grand staircase for photographs. Catherine was surprised when Sir William insisted she join them. "You have been such a devoted companion to my daughter," he said, his voice honeyed but his eyes cold. "It would be remiss to exclude you from this memento of the happy occasion." Catherine took her place at the edge of the group, her heart pounding so violently she feared it might be visible through her plain black dress. As the photographer prepared his equipment, Sir William approached her under the guise of adjusting his position. "After the reception, come to my study," he murmured, his breath hot against her ear. "There is a matter regarding your future at Thornfield that we must discuss." Terror flooded through Catherine's body. In that moment, as the photographer called for everyone to remain still, she knew with dreadful certainty what her future held. Sir William would never allow her to leave Thornfield with knowledge of what he had done. She would meet the same fate as Thomas Winters, a death made to look like suicide, or perhaps an accident, another unfortunate tragedy to be briefly mourned and quickly forgotten. "Now, everyone, please hold your positions," the photographer instructed, disappearing beneath the black cloth behind his camera. "This exposure will take several seconds. It is imperative that no one moves." As Catherine stood frozen in place, her mind screamed with the injustice of it all. Eleanor, her spirit crushed and her will destroyed. Thomas, his young life cut short for daring to love above his station. And now her, Catherine Murray, who would soon join the ranks of those who had been sacrificed to maintain the Blackwood family's reputation and Sir William's control. In that moment, as the photographer counted down to the exposure, Catherine made a decision. She would not go quietly. She would not meet Sir William in his study to accept whatever fate he had planned for her. As soon as the reception began and the household was occupied with the celebrations, she would flee Thornfield. She would take her diary and make her way to the magistrate in person. She would ensure that Sir William Blackwood faced justice for his crimes. The flash powder ignited with a brilliant burst of light, capturing the wedding party for posterity. In that split second, Catherine's face revealed the full extent of her terror and determination, an expression that would remain hidden until, more than a century later, someone thought to look more closely at the maid standing at the edge of an otherwise perfect wedding photograph. After the photograph was taken, the wedding party dispersed to begin the reception. Catherine seized her opportunity amidst the commotion, slipping away to her small attic room. Her hands shook as she retrieved her diary from beneath the floorboard and gathered the few possessions she could carry: a change of clothes, her mother's locket, and the small amount of money she had saved from her wages. The servants' staircase would allow her to leave the house unobserved, as most of the staff would be occupied with serving the wedding feast. From there, she could cut across the kitchen garden and through the woods, avoiding the main drive where she might be seen. The village was 5 miles away, a long walk, but she could reach it before nightfall if she hurried. As Catherine descended the narrow staircase, her footsteps muffled by her soft-soled shoes, she heard voices coming from the small landing below. Pressing herself against the wall, she strained to listen. Must be dealt with immediately. Sir William's voice, unmistakable in its cold authority. The girl knows too much. Is the same method necessary? This voice belonged to Mr. Simmons, Sir William's valet, a thin, silent man whom the other servants avoided whenever possible. No, not like Winters. Too suspicious to have another such incident so soon. This must appear to be a theft gone wrong. The girl attempted to steal the silver, was caught in the act, and in her panic she fell down the stairs. Mr. Simmons finished. Or perhaps out a window. Yes, quite. Search her room first. Find that diary she's always scribbling in. And the letter. She must have written it all down. Then find the girl. She can't have gone far. Catherine's blood turned to ice. They were planning her murder, constructing the narrative that would explain her death. And they knew about her diary, about the letter. Sir William was leaving nothing to chance. Carefully, silently, she retreated up the stairs, her mind racing. The servants' staircase was no longer an option. But how else could she escape the house undetected? The answer came to her suddenly. The dumbwaiter in the rear parlor used to transport tea and refreshments from the kitchen. It was small, designed for trays rather than people, but Catherine was slight of build. If she could squeeze inside, she could lower herself to the kitchen and then slip out through the delivery entrance. Making her way through the rarely used guest corridors, Catherine avoided the bustle of the reception. She could hear the string quartet playing in the main hall, the polite laughter of the guests as they celebrated the union of two great families, all of them oblivious to the dark undercurrents flowing beneath the surface of the day's events. Reaching the rear parlor, Catherine found it empty, the room unused for the wedding festivities. The dumbwaiter was located in the corner, a small wooden cabinet with doors that opened to reveal the box-like interior that transported items between floors. Catherine opened the doors and assessed the space. It would be a tight fit, but she believed she could manage it. Placing her small bundle of possessions inside first, she then contorted her body to follow, drawing her knees up to her chest and ducking her head to fit within the confined space. Once inside, she reached for the rope mechanism that would lower the dumbwaiter to the kitchen. It was difficult to operate from within, but she managed to release the catch, beginning her precarious descent. The journey was painfully slow. Through the slats in the wooden box, Catherine could see the walls of the shaft passing by as she lowered herself inch by inch, terrified that the creaking of the rope might alert someone to her presence. When the dumbwaiter finally reached the kitchen level, Catherine held her breath, listening for any signs of activity before pushing open the doors. The kitchen was unusually quiet for a day when a grand reception was underway. Most of the staff would be in the dining room and main hall, serving the guests. Catherine slipped out of the dumbwaiter, retrieving her bundle. She had just straightened up when a voice from the doorway froze her in place. Well, what have we here? Mr. Simmons stood in the entrance to the kitchen, his thin lips curved in a smile that did not reach his eyes. Sir William said you were clever, but I didn't expect to find you making your escape via the dumbwaiter. Quite resourceful, Miss Murray. Catherine backed away, her eyes darting around the kitchen for a weapon, an escape route, anything that might help her. Mr. Simmons, please, you don't have to do this. Whatever Sir William is paying you, it can't be worth having murder on your conscience. Simmons advanced slowly, deliberately, like a cat stalking a cornered mouse. My conscience has weathered far worse than disposing of a troublesome maid. Sir William and I have an understanding that goes back many years. He ensures my comfort, and I ensure his problems disappear. With sudden clarity, Catherine realized that Simmons must have been responsible for Thomas's death as well. This was not the first time he had killed for Sir William, and if she didn't escape, she would not be the last victim. In a desperate move, Catherine grabbed a heavy iron skillet from the stove and swung it with all her strength. Simmons dodged, but not quickly enough. The edge of the pan caught him on the temple, sending him staggering backward. Not waiting to see if he recovered, Catherine bolted for the delivery entrance. She could hear Simmons cursing behind her as she fumbled with the latch, finally wrenching the door open and bursting out into the late afternoon sunlight. The kitchen garden stretched before her, beyond which lay the woods and her route to the village. If she could reach the trees, she might lose any pursuit among the dense undergrowth. Catherine ran as she had never run before, her lungs burning and her legs protesting the strain. Behind her, she heard the delivery door slam open again. Simmons was in pursuit. The edge of the woods seemed impossibly distant, but with each pounding step, Catherine drew closer to potential safety. She did not dare look back, focusing all her energy on the tree line ahead. Just as she reached the first trees, a gunshot rang out, the bullet splintering bark inches from her head. Catherine ducked and swerved, plunging deeper into the woods. "You can't escape, girl," Simmons's voice echoed among the trees. "Sir William has men posted on all roads to the village. You'll never make it." Catherine pressed on, veering away from the main path and forcing her way through the underbrush. If the roads were watched, she would avoid them. She would make her way cross-country, following the river if necessary. Somehow she would reach the magistrate and expose Sir William's crimes. For hours she moved through the woods, changing direction frequently, using every trick she knew to throw off pursuit. As darkness fell, she allowed herself a brief rest by a small stream, drinking deeply of the cold, clear water. It was while she sat catching her breath that she heard the baying of hounds in the distance. Sir William had set dogs on her trail. The sound sent a fresh surge of terror through her body. No matter how cleverly she evaded Simmons and the other men, the dogs would find her by scent alone. There was only one way to confuse them. Gathering her strength, Catherine waded into the stream, wincing at the icy water. She would follow the watercourse downstream, her scent washed away by the flowing current. The water numbed her feet and legs as she pushed forward, fighting against the pull of the stream. The weight of her sodden dress dragged at her, making each step an effort of will. But the sound of the hounds grew fainter rather than stronger. Her plan was working. After what seemed an eternity of wading through the freezing water, Catherine spotted lights in the distance. Not the searching lanterns of Sir William's men, but the steady glow of cottage windows. She had reached the outskirts of a small hamlet. Not the village she had aimed for, but a collection of dwellings that might offer shelter and help. Dragging herself from the stream, Catherine approached the nearest cottage, her teeth chattering with cold and exhaustion. She raised a trembling hand and knocked on the weathered wooden door. It was opened by an elderly woman, whose eyes widened at the sight of the soaked, bedraggled figure on her threshold. "Good heavens, child, what's happened to you?" The woman drew Catherine inside without waiting for an answer, calling to someone in another room. "Edward, come quickly. There's a girl half drowned on our doorstep." An elderly man appeared, his weathered face creasing with concern as he took in Catherine's condition. "Please," Catherine managed through chattering teeth. "I need to reach the magistrate. Lives depend on it. Sir William Blackwood." "Blackwood?" The old man exchanged a glance with his wife. "You've come from Thornfield Estate." Catherine nodded, allowing the woman to wrap a blanket around her shoulders and guide her to a chair by the fire. "I was lady's maid to Miss Eleanor. There are terrible things happening there. Sir William has men looking for me. They mean to kill me to keep me silent." The couple exchanged another look, this one heavy with significance. "You're not the first to come to us with tales of Thornfield," the woman said quietly. 2 years ago, a governess fled in the night, speaking of strange sounds and Sir William's cruelty toward his daughter. "And before that," the man added, "there was a footman who claimed he'd witnessed Sir William tampering with the brake on his wife's carriage before her fatal accident." Catherine felt a surge of hope. "Then you believe me? You'll help me reach the magistrate." The old man sighed heavily. "Child, the magistrate is Sir William's second cousin. Any complaint against Thornfield goes directly to Sir William himself." The governess who sought his help was found the next day, having apparently taken her own life in the river. The hope that had briefly flared in Catherine's chest died away. Then there's no justice to be had? Sir William is above the law? "The law around here bends to wealth and influence," the old man said bitterly. "But that doesn't mean you can't escape his reach." The woman nodded in agreement. "Edward's brother runs a fishing boat out of Plymouth. If we can get you to him, he can take you aboard as a cabin boy. With your hair cut short and in proper clothes, no one would look twice at you. From there, you could make your way to America, start a new life far from Thornfield." Catherine considered their words. The idea of fleeing to America, of abandoning her attempt to bring Sir William to justice, felt like a betrayal of Eleanor and Thomas. But what good would her death serve? If she could escape, survive, perhaps someday she could find a way to expose the truth. "My diary," she said suddenly, clutching the small book that she had kept dry inside her bundle. "It contains everything. All of Sir William's crimes, what he did to Eleanor, to Thomas. I need to ensure it's preserved, that the truth isn't lost even if I must flee. Edward thought for a moment. The vicar at St. Mark's in Thornley, he's no friend to Sir William, has spoken out against him from the pulpit more than once. If anyone would safeguard your account, and perhaps find a way to use it, it would be him. A plan began to form. Catherine would copy the most important parts of her diary, creating a second record that could be sent to the vicar. Then she would make her way to Plymouth and from there to America, carrying the original diary with her as proof of her story should she ever find a way to seek justice from abroad. The elderly couple, who introduced themselves as Edward and Martha Collins, offered Catherine shelter for the night. They had no love for Sir William, whose expansion of the Thornfield Estate had forced many small tenant farmers, including their own son, off lands their families had worked for generations. As Catherine sat by their fire, writing feverishly to create her copy of the diary, she felt the first stirrings of hope since discovering Sir William's control over Eleanor. She might not be able to save her mistress from her marriage to Lord Harrington, but she could survive to tell their story, to ensure that someday, somehow, the truth about Thornfield Estate would come to light. What Catherine Murray could not know, as she wrote by firelight in that small cottage, was that she would never reach Plymouth. The copy of her diary would make it to the vicar of St. Mark's, hidden inside a family Bible carried by Martha Collins on her weekly visit to the church. But Catherine herself would be discovered by Sir William's men 2 days later, as she attempted to board a mail coach bound for the coast. Returned to Thornfield under cover of darkness, Catherine Murray would indeed meet with Sir William in his study, though not for the discussion of her future that he had proposed after the wedding photograph was taken. And afterward, a section of wall in the servants' quarters would be mysteriously replastered, concealing what lay behind it for more than a century. Her diary, hidden beneath the floorboard in her attic room, would remain undiscovered until the estate was finally sold in 2018, along with the wedding photograph that captured her terror on what would prove to be the last day of her life. As for Eleanor Blackwood, now Lady Harrington, the blue bottle would travel with her to her new home, administered first by her father during his frequent visits, and later by her husband, who had indeed accepted Sir William's offer to share his methods. The official record would state that Lady Eleanor Harrington died in childbirth in 1906, but household servants would whisper of her increasing resistance to the medicine as its effects began to wane, of her growing questions about a young man named Thomas, and of the suspicious circumstances surrounding her final illness. The story of Thornfield Estate, of Catherine Murray and Eleanor Blackwood, would lie buried for generations, a dark secret hidden behind the seemingly perfect facade of an Edwardian wedding photograph, perfect until one looked more closely at the maid's face. The discovery of Catherine Murray's diary and the wedding photograph in 2018 sent ripples through the historical community, particularly among scholars of Edwardian social history. Here was a first-hand account of coercion, control, and possible murder within a respected family, preserved only through the courage of a young servant who had risked everything to document what she had witnessed. Forensic analysis of the diary confirmed its authenticity. The paper, ink, and handwriting were all consistent with the early 1900s period. More compelling still was the correlation between events described in the diary and official records of the time. The marriage of Eleanor Blackwood to Lord James Harrington on July 25, 1903, the death of a young man named Thomas Winters recorded as a suicide in June of that year, and the absence of any record of Catherine Murray's employment after the date of the wedding. The discovery of the skeleton behind the wall in the servants' quarters in 2020 provided physical evidence to support Catherine's written account. Forensic anthropologists determined that the remains belonged to a young woman who had died violently, with evidence of strangulation. Personal effects found with the skeleton included a small silver locket containing a faded photograph of a woman and child, possibly Catherine's mother and a younger sibling. But perhaps the most chilling evidence came from the wedding photograph itself. Modern digital enhancement revealed not only Catherine's expression of terror, but also other details invisible to the naked eye. In the background, partially obscured by the wedding party, a small table is visible. Upon it stands a blue glass bottle, identical to the one described in Catherine's diary and Lord Harrington's letter to his brother. Spectral analysis of the photograph revealed something else. A faint handwritten note on the back of the photograph, visible only under ultraviolet light. The handwriting matches that found in Catherine's diary, and the message is as simple as it is haunting. If you find this, know that I tried to save her. May God forgive me for failing. The story of Thornfield Estate serves as a stark reminder of the power imbalances of the Edwardian era, particularly for women and servants who found themselves at the mercy of wealthy and influential men. Eleanor Blackwood, despite her privileged position, was ultimately as powerless as Catherine Murray when confronted with her father's determination to control her life. What became of the copy of Catherine's diary that was sent to the vicar of St. Mark's? Historical records show that Reverend Thomas Clark, who served as vicar from 1897 to 1910, was indeed known for his criticism of wealthy landowners who abused their power. However, in August 1903, just weeks after the wedding at Thornfield, Reverend Clark was found dead in his study, apparently from a heart attack. His personal papers, including any copy of Catherine's diary that might have been among them, were destroyed in a fire that broke out in the church rectory shortly after his death. The coincidence of timing has led some historians to speculate that Reverend Clark's death may not have been from natural causes. Did he attempt to use the information Catherine had provided? Did Sir William Blackwood learn of his possession of the diary copy? Without further evidence, these questions remain unanswered. As for Sir William himself, he continued to live at Thornfield Estate until his death in 1915. His obituary in the local newspaper made no mention of the rumors that had surrounded him in life, describing him only as a gentleman of the old school who had endured the tragedy of outliving his only daughter. Lord James Harrington, after the death of Eleanor in 1906, went on to become a member of Parliament, known for his conservative views and his opposition to the growing women's suffrage movement. His second wife, Lady Victoria Harrington, was described in contemporary accounts as a model of wifely devotion, who never expressed an opinion contrary to her husband's in public or private. Whether she too was subjected to the contents of the blue bottle remains unknown. The blue bottle itself has never been found. It is not mentioned in the inventory of items removed from Thornfield Estate during the 2018 sale, nor is it listed among Lord Harrington's effects after his death in 1932. Whatever substance it contained, whether laudanum, some more exotic drug, or perhaps even poison administered in small, non-lethal doses, its formula died with Sir William Blackwood. But the legacy of Thornfield Estate lives on through Catherine Murray's diary and the wedding photograph that captured her fear. They remind us that historical images often show us only what the powerful wanted us to see, the perfect, composed facade that concealed darker truths. When we look at photographs from the past, we naturally focus on the central figures, the wealthy and privileged individuals who commissioned the images, but sometimes it is in the margins, in the faces of servants, workers, and others deemed unimportant by the standards of their time, that the true story can be found. The wedding photograph from 1903, with its terrified maid at the edge of the frame, teaches us to look more closely at these margins, to consider the untold stories that might lie behind seemingly perfect historical images. It reminds us that history is not just the narrative of the powerful, but also the suppressed voices of those who witnessed, suffered, and sometimes died to protect the secrets of the privileged. In the end, Catherine Murray's courage in documenting what she witnessed at Thornfield Estate ensured that the truth would eventually come to light, even if she did not live to see justice done. Her diary, hidden beneath a floorboard and discovered more than a century later, finally gave voice to her story and to the stories of Eleanor Blackwood and Thomas Winters, all victims of a man whose wealth and position placed him beyond the reach of justice in his own time. As we conclude this exploration of the disturbing secret behind an Edwardian wedding photograph, I'm left wondering, how many other historical images contain similar hidden stories? How many other servants standing at the edges of photographs held terrible secrets they dared not speak aloud? And how many of those secrets remain buried, waiting for someone to look a little closer, to zoom in on the details that others have overlooked? Before we part ways today, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of history. If you've enjoyed this exploration, please subscribe to Shadow Frames and leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. Your support allows us to continue uncovering these hidden historical narratives and bringing them into the light. Until next time, remember to look closely at the shadows, for that is where the true stories often hide. The discovery of Catherine Murray's diary and the wedding photograph in 2018 sent ripples through the historical community, particularly among scholars of Edwardian social history. Here was a first-hand account of coercion, control, and possible murder within a respected family, preserved only through the courage of a young servant who had risked everything to document what she had witnessed. Forensic analysis of the diary confirmed its authenticity. The paper, ink, and handwriting were all consistent with the early 1900s period. More compelling still was the correlation between events described in the diary and official records of the time. The marriage of Eleanor Blackwood to Lord James Harrington on July 25, 1903. The death of a young man named Thomas Winters, recorded as a suicide in June of that year, and the absence of any record of Catherine Murray's employment after the date of the wedding. The discovery of the skeleton behind the wall in the servants' quarters in 2020 provided physical evidence to support Catherine's written account. Forensic anthropologists determined that the remains belonged to a young woman who had died violently, with evidence of strangulation. Personal effects found with the skeleton included a small silver locket containing a faded photograph of a woman and child, possibly Catherine's mother and a younger sibling. But perhaps the most chilling evidence came from the wedding photograph itself. Modern digital enhancement revealed not only Catherine's expression of terror, but also other details invisible to the naked eye. In the background, partially obscured by the wedding party, a small table is visible. Upon it stands a blue glass bottle, identical to the one described in Catherine's diary and Lord Harrington's letter to his brother. Spectral analysis of the photograph revealed something else. A faint handwritten note on the back of the photograph, visible only under ultraviolet light. The handwriting matches that found in Catherine's diary, and the message is as simple as it is haunting. If you find this, know that I tried to save her. May God forgive me for failing. The story of Thornfield Estate serves as a stark reminder of the power imbalances of the Edwardian era, particularly for women and servants who found themselves at the mercy of wealthy and influential men. Eleanor Blackwood, despite her privileged position, was ultimately as powerless as Catherine Murray when confronted with her father's determination to control her life. What became of the copy of Catherine's diary that was sent to the vicar of St. Mark's? Historical records show that Reverend Thomas Clark, who served as vicar from 1897 to 1910, was indeed known for his criticism of wealthy landowners who abused their power. However, in August 1903, just weeks after the wedding at Thornfield, Reverend Clark was found dead in his study, apparently from a heart attack. His personal papers, including any copy of Catherine's diary that might have been among them, were destroyed in a fire that broke out in the church rectory shortly after his death. The coincidence of timing has led some historians to speculate that Reverend Clark's death may not have been from natural causes. Did he attempt to use the information Catherine had provided? Did Sir William Blackwood learn of his possession of the diary copy? Without further evidence, these questions remain unanswered. As for Sir William himself, he continued to live at Thornfield Estate until his death in 1915. His obituary in the local newspaper made no mention of the rumors that had surrounded him in life, describing him only as a gentleman of the old school who had endured the tragedy of outliving his only daughter. Lord James Harrington, after the death of Eleanor in 1906, went on to become a member of Parliament, known for his conservative views and his opposition to the growing women's suffrage movement. His second wife, Lady Victoria Harrington, was described in contemporary accounts as a model of wifely devotion, who never expressed an opinion contrary to her husband's in public or private. Whether she too was subjected to the contents of the blue bottle remains unknown. The blue bottle itself has never been found. It is not mentioned in the inventory of items removed from Thornfield Estate during the 2018 sale, nor is it listed among Lord Harrington's effects after his death in 1932. Whatever substance it contained, whether laudanum, some more exotic drug, or perhaps even poison administered in small, non-lethal doses, its formula died with Sir William Blackwood. But the legacy of Thornfield Estate lives on through Catherine Murray's diary and the wedding photograph that captured her fear. They remind us that historical images often show us only what the powerful wanted us to see, the perfect, composed facade that concealed darker truths. When we look at photographs from the past, we naturally focus on the central figures, the wealthy and privileged individuals who commissioned the images. But sometimes it is in the margins, in the faces of servants, workers, and others deemed unimportant by the standards of their time, that the true story can be found. The wedding photograph from 1903, with its terrified maid at the edge of the frame, teaches us to look more closely at these margins, to consider the untold stories that might lie behind seemingly perfect historical images. It reminds us that history is not just the narrative of the powerful, but also the suppressed voices of those who witnessed, suffered, and sometimes died to protect the secrets of the privileged. In the end, Catherine Murray's courage in documenting what she witnessed at Thornfield Estate ensured that the truth would eventually come to light, even if she did not live to see justice done. Her diary, hidden beneath a floorboard and discovered more than a century later, finally gave voice to her story and to the stories of Eleanor Blackwood and Thomas Winters, all victims of a man whose wealth and position placed him beyond the reach of justice in his own time. As we conclude this exploration of the disturbing secret behind an Edwardian wedding photograph, I'm left wondering, how many other historical images contain similar hidden stories? How many other servants, standing at the edges of photographs, held terrible secrets they dared not speak aloud? And how many of those secrets remain buried, waiting for someone to look a little closer, to zoom in on the details that others have overlooked? Before we part ways today, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of history. If you've enjoyed this exploration, please subscribe to Shadow Frames and leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. Your support allows us to continue uncovering these hidden historical narratives and bringing them into the light. Until next time, remember to look closely at the shadows, for that is where the true stories often hide.